Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, The Impact of Generative AI on Search and Knowledge Discovery. I'm Chris Rand with WBR Insights, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers, Teresa Kuski, Digital Marketing Director at Ergodyne, and Merlin Yamsi, Lead Solution Consultant, Partner Engineering AI ML COE at Google Cloud, and Chris Cottle, Search Strategy and Insights at LucidWorks. Thanks everyone for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So in this panel discussion, we'll be talking about the challenges, the benefits, and the opportunities of AI, especially generative AI, in both search and knowledge discovery. So that's both today and looking into the future as this area evolves. The goal here is to better understand the impact that AI-driven search and knowledge discovery is going to have on organizations, both in terms of their people and their experiences, but also their workflows and productivity. So I wanted to mention that as we proceed, I'll be referencing some insights from our recent survey on this topic. Respondents to our survey were professionals at manufacturers and distributors across the US, EMEA, and APAC. All respondents are involved in the management or execution of search, knowledge discovery, or both at their companies. So just to get started, I wanted to mention that in our survey, 89% of respondents believed AI will improve users' experiences with search, knowledge discovery, or both in the future. So we asked respondents why they felt this way, and a common response was that AI will not only make search and discovery faster, but enhance the relevance and value of their outcomes. So I wanted to start with Merlin on this one. Merlin, how do you think the use of AI for search and knowledge discovery has evolved, and what have you witnessed in this area so far?
Yes, thank you, Chris. Before jumping into the question, I will just say a little bit about me. So I work at Google Cloud, as you said, and my primary goal is really helping Google Cloud partners to drive their digital transformation, leveraging the best-in-class technology across different domains like AI ML, artificial intelligence, smart analytics, and many other things. So regarding this AI, so the use of AI for search and knowledge discovery has evolved recently very, very significantly. The first generation that we know of, like which I would call Search 1.0, where it was driven by keyword search with static content. Typically, we call it like know what you ask. So which means you know the exact word to search for, and also the right person to ask, right? They were primarily focusing on keyword matching, and the result was literally irrelevant or inaccurate per se, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now we are with the LLMs, the advance of the LLMs, we are seeing the new type of search, which I call Search 2.0, which is more driven by what we call semantic search and generated content. So from static to generation, and then from what I call keyword to semantic, right? So typically
Sure.
now we say you know what you need and something that describes it. So you don't ask for a keyword. So you know what you need, right? And then you want to describe it and then search for it. So, and the AI will allow you to understand the semantics and the context of the search, and we provide a more relevant and personalized answer. And going forward, so this is where we are today. But going forward, we're even adding something more to that, which I call personalization and awareness, which typically is finding new things, right? So you not only get what you need, but you also find things along the way, right? So you discover things. So that's the kind of the three-step where the search and discovery knowledge has been going through. So statics, semantics, and then personalization, with adding a lot of features around that.
Great. Yeah, that's really interesting and exciting to hear. So, Teresa, what are your thoughts on the evolution of AI for search and knowledge discovery, and any comments on what Merlin had to share?
I just to give a little bit of background before I get started too. I started my career over 15 years ago in search, so doing SEO and SEM, and at that time, just like Merlin said, it was very just keyword based and matching on the user's queries to what's on the web page. So, through that evolution and time, it's changed so dramatically with the advancements in AI, machine learning, natural language processing, and now with generative AI that, for a while it was really trying to go through and optimize your content, and just making sure that you had better content on your pages. But now I think it's really kind of with generative AI driven to a whole new level of, you know, just not having those keywords, even semantically keywords on your pages, but also just providing really valuable, rich content holistically, not just on a single page, but on multiple pages of your websites. And so I think we have yet to see what Gen AI has really, how it's changed search. It's changing every day. And so I think for something new to be popping up, between every little feature in the SERPs today, it's something that we will just, exponentially see growth over the next year. I think this last year was a year of really kind of having it more publicly available, where other users and the general user can now really like start to see and utilize and understand how Gen AI works, and then start to incorporate it into their own use cases and business processes. But we have yet to see what is about to come. So really at the cusp, but.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a general user myself, I can say there's this element of exploration to it. So I think this
Mhm.
idea of discovery is pretty appropriate. Chris Cottle, is there anything else you want to add to the subject?
Sure, I'll add something quick, real quick. In keeping tradition with my co-presenters, I'll just introduce myself. So Chris Cottle with LucidWorks. LucidWorks, if you haven't heard of it, is a global company. We specialize in site search and browse, making that search experience when people get to your site really personalized, really beautiful. We want that search experience to be a superpower for companies to lift their revenue, make the search experience really, really good. So we spent quite a bit of time and research figuring out, how do we do that better? And so much of the personalization capability will be impacted by generative AI. We have quite a few commercial applications out in market already with clients that are powered by generative AI. And the question really is, how has it evolved? And it's evolved, I think, as the buyer journey has evolved, and as sort of referenced by my co-presenters, the expectation today of any user is that every site should be good. It should be somewhat like or somewhat in the ballpark of some of the top companies that they use every day, which have spent, millions of dollars, billions of dollars making those experiences really good. So the bar is set fairly high. But the journey of using a website has changed quite a bit. And in the B2B space, if you're in the B2B space, I've even had a buyer of a major B2B brand tell another company, the B2B company that they buy from, I don't even want to use your site. I just go to Google because your site
Right.
experience is not great. And Google sort of got it fixed. And that's great for Google. We love Google. But at the same time, owners of sites should be thinking about, how do I manage the experience? So the last final thing I kind of wanted to say is to really answer that hardcore question of how can Gen AI be leveraged, in search today. And, we're seeing data enrichment. We're seeing it used in chat bots to have a conversational experience that's very enriching and moves that search experience forward. Something called retrieval augmented generation. So that's going to limit the hallucinations that are impacted there. User intent and recommendations that are pulled and presented during the search experience. So as we go through this presentation from all of the presenters, I think you'll see some exciting ways that Gen AI can bring to life that search experience.
I'd like to just add on to what Chris is saying, because I think that's really important. I was alluding to it, but just this massive gap in between the user's expectation and what companies and the experiences that they can provide, and how disparate that's becoming as far as like, you know, us, these other companies catching up and thinking that they maybe don't need to because Google can do it for them or another company can do it for them. But the problem is that they're just widening that gap, and pretty soon they're going to be in that laggard category where they're just going to be obsolete because they're not even going to be needed anymore. Some other company is going to figure out like how to make their products. And speaking from like a safety, you know, at Ergodyne, we're a safety manufacturing company, and we are in an industry, in the B2B industry, where technology and, you know, advancements are not as quickly adopted by the companies. And so it's a big risk, I think, that a lot of leaders and other companies in our industry, especially in other similar industries, really need to consider when they're thinking about the future and how fast and progressive these changes are.
And Chris, just one, yeah, like you said, that you need to think about two different offering, right? A consumer and enterprise, right? In the search area, and like you see, Google search, for example, is enhancing with several AI techniques, leveraging like Google Bard chatbot to improve the search result and have better user experience on the Google search per se, right? So anyone can just come in and just do a search. On the enterprise side, we're also providing enterprise software capabilities that we can give to enterprise customers to build their own internal search, right? Or the search that they can do on their own website, things like that, right? So these are really two different categories where we're seeing a lot of progress going forward in that area.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, that idea of the bar being set high and it's kind of like a new competitive playing field is really noteworthy. So I wanted to move on to our next topic here, which is about AI maturity. In our survey, nearly half of manufacturers and distributors are using AI in search, knowledge discovery, or both today. Um, Even so, 99% claim their company's use of AI for those things is only somewhat mature or isn't mature at all. So let's talk about maturity in that respect. Starting with Teresa this time, what do you think companies are often lacking in this area? And what are the right steps for companies hoping to do better?
I think by now, most business leaders have been hearing and seeing a lot of the changes. I mean, it's become mainstream news, so I don't know how you can't. But you know, even with that, this has been going on for many, many years, and even in the last like few years, like there have been a ton of advancements in AI and in the integration with other technology and software. I think oftentimes it's just the open-mindedness and curiosity to kind of explore and test on their own. Or really, honestly, I think it's lacking the right people with the education and training necessary. You know, and especially from a C-suite perspective, you know, you want to have people closer to that C-suite that really can inform and help educate and then drive strategy and change from the organization from a top-down level, right? And so I think that's kind of the biggest thing is that, you know, one of the things we've been talking about as a company and just is like, what are all these changes? What does that mean to us? How can we best utilize it? You know, what are the other partners or software, you know, that we should be looking at integrating? And so it's partnering with the right people and how and understanding and asking the questions about how they're leveraging the technology themselves, right? And how they're integrating it. Because I think everyone's on the Chat GPT or Gen AI train where they're trying to integrate it into their software and solutions, but it's sort of like, what are you doing exactly and how is it working with your software and solution too? And it's not just in digital marketing or technology software, it's in finance, it's in operations, it's in human resources, it's in every other department in a company that this is going to affect. So I think it's really just having, you know, one of the things we kind of started this year because I've had these meetings about, you know, just where we're at with AI and giving updates, because it just was so exponential, especially after last November, so a year ago, that I was like, we have to kind of stay up to date on this. But just having more of a core group or a cross-functional group or team that's not just the technology and the digital team, it's really, you know, different people, leaders from other departments in the company that really need to then understand too what's happening, because it will affect their departments, jobs, you know, and technology that they're working with as well. So those are just a few things that, you know, we've been talking about. The other big thing I think is how do we upskill and educate, you know, the other people in the company too. And so that's been a big topic of discussion. Don't have a lot of answers, but a few things we're talking about.
It's great. Yeah, that question, what are you doing? It's such a simple one, but a big one. I wanted to turn it over to Chris. What are companies lacking and how can they improve in terms of maturity?
Yeah, just
And
to
anything you
add,
want to add to Teresa's comments? Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
well, yeah, great comments. And, you know, LucidWorks conducted about 6 months ago a really large global study, and it complements everything that Teresa just talked about. Like we had 6,000 practitioners, 3,000 companies, generated 80 generative AI use cases, but that we thought applied to pretty much any company. And what we found was that even the very best companies, what we call the trailblazers, and there weren't many of them, but even they only had about 15 of those 80 that were in the experimental stage or in any kind of new commercial application. So one, don't feel bad if you're not jumping right in with both feet into the deep end of the pool. It's okay. I think the key to this question here is the right steps, the right first steps that you need to take. Like Teresa talked about, it's understanding where you're going to have a use case that you can handle and wrangle and manage. You can afford to do it, because we'll get into some of the costs around large language models and other things, which, you know, can be a bit of a surprise if not handled correctly. And then where you could have a closure point to it. So just like any new technology, think back to mobile or internet, whatever it is. This is like a life-changing, business-changing, we'll never go back. This is like a moment that we have tipped the scale. So getting into the right area, you have to have a use case where you have an endpoint to it, where you can say, here's a beginning and a middle and an end to this trial we're going to do. That's where you have the right partner or the right people, as Teresa talked about, inside your organization that can consult with you about what does that full story look like. And that's a lot of what we do. We help warn and consult and talk and tell and build the right technologies. One of our partners is Google. So, you know, that's really, really important. I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know, but the success stories that I've seen so far, the commercial applications that I've seen, they take one thing. They say, we're going to do this one thing. We're going to do it well. We're going to make sure there's an end story. Did we get what we wanted out of it? And they control all the variables more sensibly that way. That way they don't go crazy and feel like they're really exposed.
Okay, great. Merlin, anything you wanted to add on the subject?
Yeah, I know that you've said a lot, but to simplify some of those AI maturity, from what I've seen on interacting with partners, I can categorize this in three different buckets, right? You have the number one is more what I'll call awareness. So people just are speaking about it. They have ideas, right? But they have no strategy of using it. There is a lot in this category, right? So the lack of understanding of what AI can really do, but they are talking about it and they're trying to figure out, right? And then you have the number two, which I call active. They do some experimentation, they do implementation, some patchwork here and there. A lot of POCs, they can prove it, they can know it's working, right? They see really that it's working. And I think a lot more are in this category because a lot has been trying. But the next step to move into production is usually where they are lacking some expertise. So they have concern about cost. It could be expensive. They have concern about expertise of moving from pilot to production, right? And then the last one, which is the number three, what I call mostly the operational, right? People that have been doing AI day to day, they have a dedicated team, they have infrastructure set up, they have a AI solution that they've developed and maintained. So these are the third one. You have few of these, but even these ones, sometimes they're lacking some of the enterprise readiness because they need to make sure that the data quality, the model is not biased, right? The explainability, safety. So this is kind of the iceberg. Some very small thing that usually when you build an AI solution, you don't think about it to start with. So you build the solution, you have the return, but there are some mechanism of safety, bias, explainability, things that people don't usually think it's important. But this is the last part that I think bringing an AI solution up to maturity, full maturity, is adding all these safety capability on top of it.
Sure. Okay, great. Thanks, Merlin. So I wanted to just continue on this track talking about generative AI. Going back to our survey, so among those manufacturers and distributors using AI in search, knowledge discovery, or both, we found that roughly 60% claim they're already using generative AI to create additive content in response to search queries. So Chris, I wanted to start with you this time on this question. And I think in a lot of ways, this is just expanding on what we've already discussed here. But how are companies making progress with generative AI and search and knowledge discovery? If there's anything else you want to touch on there, what does it look like in practice and how is it going to evolve?
Sure. I'll give you an example, and it's probably something similar to what you're hearing about. One of the first early easy endpoints with the on-site generative AI collaboration or use is in chat. And a lot of commercial companies have a chat bot and try to make it easy, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that we have developed, and we have clients that are using this, so I'll just use a genericized example, is let's say that you had a company that sells wine and somebody comes on the site, they're not really sure what they want. Typically, they would go on and maybe chat with the representative or a pre-programmed chatbot. Now you can utilize a large language model like Google Vertex, for example, behind the scenes. And the experience, and this is kind of what we've built, is that somebody could go on and say, ask a question, what wine pairs really well with fish? Of course, that's a pre-canned answer that would generate it back, but you could also get an answer from the LLM, which would be more extensive, much more interesting and engaging. You could have someone come on and say, could you recommend a product for that? So they're not using the site navigation and drop downs, and they're not searching and browsing at all. Right there in the chat, it could recommend the product, show the product picture and the price, but it's being curated or limited to give responses that are only from your catalog and never show something from a competitor. So there's security there. There's what we call security trimmings. That is the kind of additive experience in the search that generative AI will power all over the place. And so, if it's a facet, which is those rows of presentations of things over on the side on a shopping experience, or if it's content that's shown that's relative, it could even generate content that's relative to that thing if it doesn't exist in your database. So it's going to accelerate relevance. And that's what I think good looks like, is having those kind of examples. You could apply that to pharma and healthcare with employee productivity, text summarization of really long documents. And as an employee, who wants to read that? You could use an LLM to generate a text summarization to help you. If you're in financial services, you could do that as well. High net worth individuals that are coming on and they're asking questions, your agents could be much more prepared. So I think the applications are virtually unlimited. Choosing the right ones where they offer value and improve the experience are really the thing. And, making those things successful are important. I think that's why people are so optimistic. In the survey that we're talking about here and the surveys we've done, everyone's optimistic. They're like, you know what? We think that AI is going to blow it out of the water. 90% of us are going to be, seeing this as a big impact in the future. And although I don't question those answers, I do think seeing commercial application where it lifts the experience, where it changes conversion up a few percentage points, where it's meaningful, those are the applications that are going to have the most traction. And we're seeing some of that in the early stages right now.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. That context is really helpful. Merlin I'm sorry, Merlin. Is there anything you want to share on the subject?
Yeah, so from clearly there are some good innovation that customer or partner are going through right now, and this is significantly impacting three key aspects of the information discovery, like improving the ranking and the retrieval, right? That typically, you know, when you do search, the ranking and the retrieval of information are some of the key things that you want to make better, right? So when you understand and you query the document, the content, you want to have the right document coming on top, or the retrieval of the semantic that you want to do. So that's number one. Number two is more on the extraction and synthesizing the answer, right? You extract something and then you synthesize the answer and getting data from multiple sources, right? And then you put it in a very synthetic way. And the last one is more what I call the generative conversational knowledge. Like you're asking questions, but you want to kind of go more deeper, right? You want to go again and ask another question based on the answer. So you start having conversation with the system, right? So these are kind of the three areas where we are seeing a lot of progress on the application that are currently being built. And the technology that they leverage are usually around like vectorization, like the vector database. You know, there's a lot coming up recently. Vector database help really to add semantic understandings on users' goal, right? You create embeddings, you vectorize things, and then you start searching the closest one, right? That's kind of the new trends of the search that is currently being very used by customer. The summarization and the conversation one are related to that. Like when you have vectorized and then you do a search, then the result that come up, you want to summarize and then you want to add conversation to it, right? So those are some of the things that we're seeing more and more. So for that, we are having two strategies around those. So one is more like providing an out-of-the-box solution that customer or partner can just use, bring their data and start doing search and then get the result as they want, right? Summarized and then having some additional information on the bottom. And then the other one is that might be limited for some for some customers. So you want to build something from scratch, right? So then we provide you with the toolbox, with the components, so that you can build your own search engine. We provide you with the vector database. We provide you with some of the LLM APIs that you can use for summarization. So then you start building the stack yourself, right? So you have both way of doing those things today. And customers, depending on their maturity, so they will start maybe with one and then maybe dig deeper into the other one if the first one doesn't respond to their needs.
Okay, great. Thanks, Merlin. Teresa, did you want to share anything on the topic?
I think the one thing that I would add, and I would agree with Chris and Merlin both, is just from that conversational aspect. I did want to share that I am a part of a lot of other like B2B groups with digital and e-commerce practitioners. And the one thing that's talked about a lot is the search experience. And I feel like a lot of companies are really still trying to figure out how to create that best search experience. We are a medium-sized company, so we've opted to work with a search partner to really kind of create a best-in-class experience, leveraging different AI technologies within the platform itself. But I think that is a big point to make, is that a lot of people just are trying to use something that's out of the box. They're trying to configure an elastic search themselves, something like that, where it's like, I think we've kind of surpassed that point in time where it's really hard to maintain and to keep up with all the technology and the AI advancements, that I think really looking for a good partner and leveraging a good partner, if you don't have an in-house development team and whatnot, or the cost to like update and maintain and have that in-house is important, because I think a lot of people were B2B online. So a lot of the people that might be listening to this call are just at that point where they're not using anybody at all. And just kind of where it's evolved, back to that conversational point is back, when I started in search marketing, it was like, 1 to 2, like 3, like keyword, keywords to, find something. Now it's like 15 plus. I forgot what Google, and on average, and they're all like questions. So I mean, we've been trained through the years to kind of search for a keyword, gloves, and then, oh, now I want black gloves, and now I want gloves for, construction work, and now I want gloves for construction work in the winter, when it's negative 20 degrees. And I think if you are, again, going back to benchmarking your experience within Google and, Bing and Amazon and others, I think you need to kind of look at those experiences and really leverage that experience, UX experience, and really think about how you create that on your own site, because that is the benchmark and that is what customers are expecting. But it will be more of a conversation. I really think about, like, how are we going to shop in the next, like, not even like, it's not even a 5 to 10 year thing. It's like a 1 to maybe 3 year thing, maybe, where I'm not going to be looking. And to your point, Chris, I think about using like navigation. Like, I think navigation is going to become obsolete. You should just be able to build off of that conversation and have that search experience on your site. And I think the benefit from a individual company perspective is you have all of that data. There is another point to that, because that is a big problem too. But you have all of that data internally that you're able to then leverage and really build a solution, or leverage a software that can build a solution to really create that best-in-class experience. So there's a lot there, but I think, again, benchmarking, and then really more of that conversational and how we're going to like expect that in search on everyone's site in the future. And if you don't, especially when you're talking to younger generations, they're going to just leave. So you're going to have to find new customers, I guess.
To add to that, I know that, for example, we're talking about multimodal search, right?
Right.
Which allow you to start adding not only text, right? Images, videos that you can show. You can look at something and then you search for that, right? You don't even have to know what the name of that thing is, right? So you can add text, video, or images on the search and start looking for things, right? So this is the new type of search that we're currently seeing coming, and will be very powerful.
Well, and I think like the most exciting thing too about Gen AI, and voice search has been around for years now, and it's been terrible. I mean, really, literally terrible. And now we've been trained on, trying to interact with voice search when it's just, now with Gen AI, I think the expectation is going to be that that should be a much better experience very soon. And to the chatbot, experience, I actually was just chatting with a company recently today, actually, about where my order was and if I could cancel my order. And I realized it was an automated chatbot. And I was like, this is terrible. Get me to a representative. And I think that's going to be where having some of those older solutions and technology is going to actually hurt you in the long run too. So, if you're not thinking about and testing and trying to leverage the new and latest technology or the updates that are out in the industry, like, you're going to fall behind really quickly.
Excellent. Great observations. And excuse me. In fact, I set up these questions and some of our findings from the survey, and I think we actually touched on this next question here, but I'm going to pose it anyway and see if there's anything anyone wants to expand on it. First of all, we found that most respondents claim they're going to use AI to summarize internal document content for employee searches. So that was something Chris mentioned. Just wanted to point that out. 65.5% of respondents said that. 66.5% said they believe AI will make their work more accurate. And just over half said it'll speed up their output as well. So we've talked about a lot of use cases already. Teresa, I wanted to start with you and see if there's anything else that comes to mind that you want to add there in terms of use cases or anything else internally that companies should be thinking about.
Yeah. There's quite a few things that we've been testing over the last year. I mean, right when ChatGPT was released, I'm very technology focused, and I love kind of the new latest and greatest. So we started testing a lot of different things, trying to figure out what use cases we could really leverage and utilize immediately. I was asked, like, can we use it to create all of our content, like all of our product copy and descriptions and blogs. And I was very apprehensive at first. I said, let's just do some testing and kind of figure out where this technology is at. And while I think it is good for content generation, I think there is a lot of curation that needs to happen afterwards. It's a good writer's block starter where you're trying to develop content and come up with ideas. We're using it in search for different things like product recommendations and things like that. But SEO is another one. We've been having some great success. But now with the release of the creating your own GPTs, something that we've been testing and have found some really great efficiencies on are even things like taking an image and then extracting all the text from the image, because from an accessibility and compliance standpoint, you want to make sure all that's in alt text. So building out a GPT to quickly do that, and when you times that by 6 images per SKU times the 20 SKUs or 50 SKUs that we have that are launching, that's a insane time saver. So I think it's just kind of, again, going back to testing out small use cases. What takes you the most time to do? What are the capabilities of Gen AI right now, and how could you leverage that? Creating more content and reproducing it for different channels. So we only have one video production person, and we have the rest of the team who doesn't maybe know video software, but are there different softwares and tools that we could leverage and utilize so that we get all the content, but somebody else can actually put it together much easier, utilizing a different solution, like a Runway or a Descript or something like that. So there's a lot of opportunity. Data analysis, translations is another thing we've been testing a lot, consumer insights, and really kind of describing or getting a general sentiment from some of our data. So I think it's hard to kind of figure out where to start, but even if there's one thing you could, this takes us a lot of time to do. Can we solve this with a different software or a solution? Is sort of where we started. So
that's great.
Or something that costs a lot of money to do too, right? So
sure. Start where the need is, right? That was kind of that's great. Great, thanks, Teresa. Merlin, anything you want to add to the subject? We're focusing on how generative AI can improve work here.
Yeah, so I've been working with few partners or customers, and some of the, I would say the top 3 use cases that I've seen were around, they have a huge number of documents, right, inside the company, complex documents. And then they want to do what we say summarization. So they are bringing all those documents, including emails, reports, many type of document into one place, and then they don't have to read all the documents. So they have the AI to read that and then to summarize that, and then find some good insight inside those documents and summarize it for them, right? So this is probably the number 1 use case that I've seen. Even for research, you have a research report and you want to have the key findings of the research, right? Yeah, it's very good for that. One that I also saw was having an email chain. You have a lot of email chain that you use Gmail. You can see that, and then you want to have an overview of the main point that has been going through all those emails. So they're using it for several of these things. The number 2 is more on the personalization side, where typically you want to be able to surface relevant information by understanding the context of the search query, right? And you take into account the user intent and the search history, right? So when you have that, you start personalizing the search result, right? That fit into that person. And lastly was more on something that we call generating insights from the data, right? It's more, you want to take a decision, but you have a large amount of data that you have to analyze, right? So you can, and you want AI to uncover some of the hidden patterns in an insight in that data, and then provide it to you for you now to take decision, right? So kind of one where you maybe that will be covered in the next topic too. But yeah, very how do you leverage the human and decision making process by the AI and have that sort of. So these are kind of the use case that I've been seeing. On top of the others that are question answering for support and things like that.
Okay, great. Yeah, almost like a more of an analysis approach. So that's really interesting to hear. Chris, did you want to add anything to that in terms of how generative AI can help improve work?
I'll add one more thought, and I'll be brief because I know we want to get to at least one more question here. Think about the term generative AI. It's called generative AI versus just plain AI because it's powered by a large language model, which has been trained to mimic what a human would do. And so if you think about use cases, that should be your key. How do we scale personalization and utilize the power of a large language model behind it to mimic what a human would do to make the experience of engagement and searching better? Versus regular AI, which is just machine learning that uses non-LLM data sets that aren't necessarily trained. So that distinction, you don't have to be technical to really understand that, but that's why Gen AI has exploded. And I would challenge you, if you're struggling with the use case and you're not really sure, go use a large language model today. Just sign up if you haven't. ChatGPT is common, but I love Google Bard. Use it every day. Go in there, use that, and just ask the question and see what you get. It's a fun experience.
Yeah, there's definitely like a jump in and try it element that makes it available. Um, okay, great.
Oh,
One more
there's one
question.
more that
Oh,
I
sorry.
wanted
Yep.
to ask Chris. A lot of the manufacturer or even people that are building product, right? So the description and creating description and attribute for new product is something that I'm seeing a lot coming up, right? Like you have a product that you can show to the AI, and then it will create a description and attribute for you, right? That is very, very powerful, and that is coming very fast. Also, I've seen that in retail. That will really disrupt the retail market.
Yeah, we use that. We use Google Vision actually to help with that, and then we
Exactly.
yeah, with your LLM. So it's powerful, and sort of what Teresa talked about. The whole search experience is changing.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, sorry about that, Merlin. Should have given you a chance to respond there. One last question here, and then I want to move on to some audience Q&A because we do have some questions there. And that's this topic of balancing AI with human expertise, which I think is an important one to focus on. It's one of the recommendations that we had from our report. And by the way, the audience members will have an opportunity to scan a QR code to access that report towards the end of our conversation. But Merlin, I wanted to start with you on this. What are your thoughts on this topic, and what are some other key recommendations that you'd like to offer our audience?
Yeah, so that's what I was alluding in the previous one. We're balancing AI with human expertise is crucial, really, if we want to maximize the benefit of AI and also minimize the potential risks, because there are risks in AI. AI excels at processing large amount of data, identifying patterns, making predictions, and things like that. But usually it lacks the human touch, right? Creativity and just like nuanced decision making. If there is a decision that may or may not be, nuanced, there might be some challenge there. And that's where human expertise come into the play. They have deep knowledge, right? They have expertise, they have context to make judgment, right? Calls in very complex situations. So if you can mix those two, it will be very interesting. And also, the impact is different depending on where you are. Like if you have people's decision in context, for example, like a Netflix recommendation, maybe Netflix is recommending you a movie, but if it's not the good one, it's okay. It doesn't really matter because it's not harming you, right? It's just that you may not be watching that recommendation. But when you are thinking about high-stakes decision-making process where it touches cybersecurity, medical, or judicial, like things that could be very critical, and that's where some of the role AI will play need to be associated with a decision-making human factor, right? So that you make sure that what the AI is doing is saying also is taking into account some of the expertise of the human, because this is critical, right? So these are kind of what we call the high-stake decision-making process that are very important. And for cybersecurity, for example, we've been working with some cybersecurity company where the AI system will proactively discover vulnerability, detect anomalies, predict things, but they don't have the ability to make the decision that regulators or end user in critical situation want to get, right? So we need to ensure that balance in both ways. So that's something that I think would be very interesting. So for other recommendation that I would say is more about probably investing in AI education and training. That's something that I think it's very, very relevant going forward, because a lot of companies just don't have skills or people that are well versed into the AI, to start understanding all these things, right? So investing in education and training is very key. And we just recently launched a free education that you can see on our website. It's called AI Academy. It's starting in January, where you would be able to learn in few weeks a lot of content about generative AI.
Okay, great. Great. Thanks, Merlin. Teresa, what are your thoughts on the subject?
That's really great, Merlin. I think like it's really powerful for like big companies that have the technology and are producing the technology to also have that foresight to educate and train, because that is one of my biggest fears. I think like when you think about like younger generations, I just read something, or it was a meme about like kids now, like they know that they have the resources and tools to just go find the answer, right? So they're just going to go try and find the answer. But the problem is too, is that they don't even understand sometimes that really true knowledge is harnessed and is in people's brains, right? The expertise and just the experience through the many years, is within a person. So kind of making sure that, especially with younger generations as they grow up with this technology, that it's to always like double check and question, and to really have that base knowledge or expertise and education in their background, so that you can always, because I think while right now it's definitely always really questionable, it will get to the point where it is much better and so good that we may not have to question it as much. But that's also a little scary too, I think. I think we always want a human at the other side, at least in my opinion, checking and questioning and thinking about things from different perspectives. So I really love that there are, companies that are going to be focused on education and training, and really kind of promoting that a lot more.
Yeah, I'll just add one final thought, which is I agree. This technology is not ready to be self-driving yet. And so you need a human involved. And the good news is there's partners and there's consultants and there's others who understand this stuff. You need to have AI expertise for model training, for security trimming, for controls, for data enrichment, for content exclusion, for merchandising. They're out there and they're ahead of the curve. and they're available to consult. So it's not a set it and forget it yet, but like Teresa said, it will be someday, but right now you got to have someone involved. You got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one sentence that I like to say in this case, Chris, is that the relationship between human and AI is not a competition. It's a partnership, right?
Mm.
And AI can amplify and augment human rather than replacing them, right? So it's really something that we need to be aware of.
Great. All right, excellent. So that wraps up all our panel questions, but we do have some Q&A questions coming in. I figured I'd just read them, and whoever wants to jump in can answer. The first one's about security. How cautious should companies be about Gen AI in terms of security? And can you talk about what security means in this context? So anyone have any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick on that one. We've touched on it a little bit, but security means those security trimmings, making sure that customer client data isn't used to train a large language model where they wouldn't want it. The data and where it goes and where it sits is important, so governance rules apply. And you can also work with any of the large companies. We have one too. Have a standard so that it's expressed, it's transparent. Ours is called STAR. It stands for secure, transparent, accurate, and responsive, but there's several others out there. But you need to have an ethical approach to how we're going to train these large language models. Remember, they mimic what humans would do. So you don't want hallucinations. You don't want things that don't exist. You don't want errors coming through. You don't want something that would violate your ethics policies. So, security is really important, but security is defined very, very broadly. So you need to work with a partner on it and wrangling that.
Okay, great.
To
Yeah,
add
that question. So go
to
ahead.
add
Yeah.
to that, Chris, is one of the primary security concerns that I've seen also talking to partners was the thing that you can generate with AI, malicious content, right? You can really create fake news, or you can phishing email or deep fake, like we see, right? And then you can then use them to harm individuals or organizations. So this is one area where we need confidence on AI to make sure that that's part of security is taken care of, on top of other security which are more on the privacy side, the infrastructure security side, where you need to make sure your infrastructure is secure when you do AI, typically, right? And that is something that, for example, a lot of our partners come to us because of that, because we provide some of the end-to-end secure platform, because when you do AI, you don't want to leak your IP, right? You don't want to leak your data. You don't want to expose your sensitive data. So all these things need to be really taken care of. Otherwise, you will be building AI and then putting everything out there without any security and safety, and that could be very, very dangerous.
Nice.
That's great.
The only thing I would add to that is that from a, consumer perspective of AI, that it is a big question, and it is something that, our leadership team were a little bit apprehensive about. So, I mean, we created an AI policy internally a few months ago, and, kind of did a little bit of an overview with, some of the teams that are utilizing it and trying to leverage the different solutions. But it's definitely a question that comes up. And I think with even our partners and having terms and privacy policies that we hope will be adhered to, it is just one of those things when you have so many partners and companies that you're working with in your toolbox. I mean, the other option is to bring that in-house and do it ourselves, building out a team, but that also is pretty expensive and time consuming. So it's just kind of the value versus, the effort versus value kind of question too. So yeah, I think security is huge though. And I think it's maybe from my perspective has limited us a little bit on just exactly how much we've been able to test and explore, because I do think there are a lot of use cases. I'd love to do a lot of more, like the internal, building an internal tool for customer feedback and questions, and really leveraging all the data that we have in our SharePoint site, which is endless, and it's crazy after 40 plus years of business. But so those are some things that we're trying to kind of work through and talk through too.
Right. Okay, excellent. Yeah, and I have two more questions here, and one of them is about data privacy, and I'm not sure if we kind of touched that on a little bit with that question, but how does a B2B company use a large language model when their product data needs to be kept private? So is there anything anyone wants to add on that subject?
Yeah, I can take this stuff here because that was part of what I was alluding in the previous one, where you need to make sure your data is kept private when you build your AI. So typically, you would want to have a customer managed VPC, virtual private cloud, or on premise, right? Type of scenario where you consider deploying your LLM in your own tenant, right? Rather than using a shared tenant, right? Something like that, so that you can reduce the risk of people accessing the data from the cloud,
Yeah,
unauthorized access. And the other one, the other techniques that people usually also do is data anonymization, which allow you to feed the data, you anonymize your data before you feed that into the LLMs. And also synthetic data generation, which in fact, in this case, you create synthetic data that mimics your characteristic of the real product or the real data without compromising the privacy. So it's those kind of techniques that you can use typically to make sure that your data is kept private, even though you are doing LLMs, right? You start.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think that's right, Merlin. And we've seen a lot of success with that, limiting the data that goes through to a large language model, hosting it locally if needed, putting the security trimmings around it. And if you're game for it and your partner is, you can also do a custom or a bespoke LLM. Those exist. And so there's plenty of opportunity. I wouldn't be scared of that issue overall. There's lots of ways around it commercially today.
That's great. Anything from you, Teresa, or should we go on?
We're just actually exploring that ourselves too. So we
Okay.
haven't actually pulled anything in-house, but yeah, working with a cloud solution and possibly there are some ideas there we've been discussing, but definitely more of a partner relationship for us too.
Got it. Okay. Great. All right. One more question, and that's just about cost. Can Gen AI be expensive to use? And does anyone have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it can be. It's a bit of an eye opener for some companies. Let's say that you have a business and you're choosing to implement a Gen AI and say a chatbot, and it's going out 10,000 times a day to ask a unique question. Well, you're
Right.
paying a commercial price for that. It could be thousands of dollars a day. So be ready for that, but there's a way to factor that into your model. It might improve things so much that it's totally doable and you love it. But at the same time, you can also store those answers so that you don't have to hit the same answer all the time to the LLM. And these LLM companies and your partners can work through all that and help to produce a model so that you understand what your costs are and you're not surprised. But they're not free. Just like a pharmaceutical drug, you got to pay for it when it comes out. So, Google's invested billions of dollars in just getting BART up and going. So it's easy to use for free, the non-commercial, like the end user version. But paying for the commercial side and the accuracy and the things that you need, the security trimmings, the training, et cetera, those things come at a price. So it's not unreasonable and it's manageable.
It's
And
great. Yeah,
for
good
the cost
insight.
also, yeah, for the cost also we have we can also split that into break that down into three categories. Like you have the infrastructure, right? Like you said, the which include the cost of the hardware, the software, the cloud computing resource if you're using the cloud. Then you have the training cost if you are training you're doing training and things like that, right? You will be leveraging data acquisition, labeling on model training, and then the deployment cost, which will include cost of deploying and maintaining, right? Maintaining the solution. So those three costs, when you pull that together, could be expensive. But what we are seeing is a decreasing cost as the technology matures. We are seeing a decreasing cost, but yeah, people need to take that in consideration when they're starting to deploy model in production, because usually when you do POC, the cost is not very high because you're just calling some APIs, right? Typically to validate some of the concept. But when you're starting to think about deploying that solution in production, that's where you really have to think about the cost, because the infrastructure, the deployment cost could be something that would be very, very high.
It's great. Okay, excellent. Teresa, anything, or should we jump ahead?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't have much experience in there yet, but hopefully
Okay.
soon.
That's great. All right, excellent. All right, well, that wraps up all our questions, including the Q&A questions. Before we conclude, I just wanted to share that the complete report that I mentioned a few times there is available for free download on the LucidWorks website. We have a QR code here, which you can scan now. I'll wait just a few moments so you can do that. And while I'm holding there, I just want to add that you can also flip back later once this recording is available on demand, if you want to access the report there. So I'll go ahead and skip ahead now and just say thanks to all our panelists for joining today. It was really great hearing your thoughts on this subject. And I want to thank our audience for tuning in as well. So have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.